Hey everyone, welcome back to Pawpaw's Workshop. I wanted to give you a quick update on the progress of my garden. Now, as most of you know, I pretty much started completely over this year, and I only had just a few strawberries and some shallots or green onions that was left from last year. So everything else is brand new, and I want to give you an update on what's been happening this spring season. Now this year I've got quite a few satsumas. The blossoms have already passed, and you can see the little small satsumas that are forming, and this year should be a very nice crop. Now 2 years ago we did some really heavy pruning of this tree in the fall, and it really made a difference last year. We had very few satsumas. In fact, I think it was about 3 dozen is all we had on this tree. But this year is totally different. It has bounced back completely, and it is just absolutely full of the little small satsumas. I know there's a lot of channels out there that you can watch on the gardening that they have been established for years, and there's plants everywhere. Well, this gives you an opportunity to be able to see the very beginning of a garden and how it's going to progress. Now, yes, I did have some soil left over. No, you never throw the soil away, and I'll show you how to be able to rejuvenate that soil so you'll be able to plant again for this year and each successive year thereafter. All of the plants that I have, I started from seed. These bell pepper plants are doing outstanding, and I've already transplanted some. Now this is the big boy tomato, and the same thing. I started these from seed, and I have been slowly planting them into the garden. At this point, I've got to get them into their permanent location because they are beginning to get root bound. Now this fence row is completely done. I have some bell peppers, I have some green onions, strawberries, and I've thrown in some marigolds to be able to add some color. And I think this is going to be really nice. Now, yeah, the pots look a little bit empty right now, but those bell pepper plants will get quite large. These green onions, they're ready to harvest again and start over. I have a little experiment going with the spinach in this small pot, and it's doing better than expected. And then over here I have some additional bell peppers, and then into the tomato area. I've got 6 of them planted over in this area now, and they're doing absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to be able to work in the garden, not nearly as much, but today I want to get these tomatoes planted over into these buckets. I want to show you how I'm going to do that. First, I do not throw away the old soil. This soil is actually a couple of years old, and I've had various crops in it. But what I like to be able to do is rejuvenate it, and I start by really stirring this up, breaking it up, making it nice and loose again so that the water is going to be able to flow through it. Doing the container gardening as I do, the soil becomes the most expensive part. So you really do not want to throw away the soil. There's really no need to. You can add some extra nutrients back into the soil, and you're good for another year. And you can keep doing that year after year. I was a little surprised at the local gardening center. I really didn't have a whole lot of choice on the products that I could get, but I decided to use this potting mix, and this I think will do real well. It was very surprising to me as I would look through the selection. There was only one product that actually had the container gardening product, and I just don't like that brand. So this is the route that I decided to go. To begin with, to make this mixture, I'm using 2 bags of the Miracle-Gro potting soil mix, and then I'm adding the earthworm castings. Now this is about 1.5 bags that I'm using with this mix of the 2 bags of the Miracle-Gro potting soil. Now I want to get this mixed in really thoroughly, and then I'm going to come back and add some additional nutrients. I have found that the earthworm castings really does help out the plants a lot. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of the magnesium sulfate, which is nothing more than the Epsom salt. You don't need a lot, and actually I put a little bit more than what I was planning to, but because I've got 2 bags of the potting soil mix, I think this will mix in just fine. And the last item is a vegetable fertilizer. Now this is the 10-10-10, which is a good even base fertilizer, and it doesn't take a lot. I hope you can see that this is not rocket science, and you can just put in the different nutrients, and that's really it. You do not need to measure anything. You don't need to go crazy with this, because over the course of the season, you're going to be adding additional nutrients along the way. The most important thing that you want to do is mix this thoroughly. Now, with 2 bags of the potting soil mix to begin with in this wheelbarrow, it takes a few minutes to thoroughly mix it. But I want to get all the way down to the very bottom, scraping this really well, mixing it thoroughly so all the fertilizer, the earthworm castings, the Epsom salts or the magnesium sulfate is completely mixed up into this soil. And then I'm ready to add it to the buckets, and I don't have to do this but one time as I go through the different buckets, filling them up and planting my tomato plants and my bell peppers. And don't forget, I'm going to be having some more plants very shortly to be planting as well. I've already added some of the new mix in with the old soil and mixed it up thoroughly. And at this point, the last third of the bucket, I'm going to have all of my new mix that I just created. And I'm going to do that for the rest of the buckets on this row. Now for the exciting part. It's time to actually plant the tomatoes. Now these tomatoes are really past due. They should have been in the ground already. So you'll notice that they're a little bit root bound, and I want to be able to plant them all the way down to these 2 little leaves right here, and I'm actually going to take these leaves off because the roots will develop along this entire stem. I'm going to just use my hand and make a nice deep hole to be able to drop this tomato plant in, and then just gently pack the dirt around it, and that's really all there is to it. But having that planted so deep, it'll generate a nice root ball that'll be able to provide the growth that's necessary and hopefully produce some beautiful tomatoes this season. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next tomato plant, and quite frankly, you really can't plant these too deep. For the tomatoes, this is the way to do it. Get it nice and deep so that you can create a nice big root ball to be able to help that plant grow throughout the whole entire season. You know, it's kind of funny. It really doesn't take long to be able to set these buckets up and plant the different plants. The problem that I have had lately, I just haven't had a lot of time, and that's why I'm so far behind. Here's another little tomato plant. You can see how it's very definitely root bound, and it's time to get this into the ground. I'm going to loosen up the dirt around this little small root ball, stick my hand down into the bucket, create a nice big deep hole, and plant that little tomato plant. Now that all of these are planted, it's time to wash out this container. I want to wash it very thoroughly, and then I'll be able to plant some more plants in it. Yes, I do like to recycle these and get as much use as I can out of each of these little seed pod containers. I know you can't tell it from the camera, but it's actually starting to rain, and I'm starting to get rather wet. Still in all, I want to be able to water in these little tomato plants very thoroughly, and of course rinse off the outside of the bucket. I want to try to keep the garden as neat as I can this year, so I'm going to gently water all of these little plants. This one had quite a bit of dirt on the leaves. Wash that off, soak in this water into the dirt, and these plants will be off and running. Now I planted this about a week ago, and this is the growth that has taken place in a week, which is pretty remarkable considering all of these plants were started as seed at the same time. The next one that I planted was a few days later, and you can see it's already starting to pick up and grow. So I expect in a week's time, these all will be catching up with each other and looking great. And of course, these are the ones that I had planted today. I'm hoping this year, since I'm planting these tomato plants about a week or so apart from each other, they'll produce the tomatoes at the same rate. So I'll have tomatoes from each of the plants at different times over the season. I just picked up 2 knockout roses that I'm going to be planting over in the corner, but these I think are going to be beautiful and add some color to the backyard. Now that all these plants are planted, and I only have just a few more to go, it's time to start setting up for some additional plants that I'm going to be putting into the seed and growing so I can have succession planting. Now the spinach was just a small test. I wanted to see how well it would do in that small pot. I'm going to be adding some more spinach so I can have succession planting, and I think I'm actually going to do some hydroponics along the way also. Well, it started to rain outside and I had to come in, and I'm actually pretty wet from trying to get all the materials put back away. But the one thing that I wanted to mention to you is that not this last fall, but the fall before, we had done some significant pruning on that satsuma tree. And as a result, the crop that we had this past year was rather small, and that's okay. But that pruning has paid off because this year it is just looking fantastic. It is full of the little small satsumas that are getting started. All the blossoms have fallen off now. I didn't catch that in the video, but it was a beautiful sight to see, with basically the whole tree was just covered in white flowers. One final look at my garden where I have all the marigolds. In years past, I've never had flowers growing like this mixed in with the garden. I think this is going to be a great addition. It's going to help those little pollinators come into the garden. I think that's going to be nice. Plus, I think it looks good. I think I'm going to add some additional flowers throughout the yard. And I love how this spinach is doing in this small pot. And actually, I've already been harvesting the spinach out of this and putting them into the salad. It's fantastic. So this is turning out to be a real good season so far, even though, yeah, I'm a little bit behind. I just have too much of a crazy schedule. The garden is taking a little bit of a back seat, but it's catching up, it's looking good, and I'm real happy with the way it's starting out so far. And I absolutely love being able to start my plants from seed rather than going down to the garden store to be able to buy the different plants. This is the way to go, and I'm going to harvest the seeds and be able to get it where I can be self-sustaining and not have to even buy seeds in the future. So thanks a lot for watching this real short update video on the garden. I think it's coming together pretty nice, considering that basically it's a brand new garden. So if you guys are just starting out gardening, well, this is kind of give you an idea of what it's going to look like for the first season. Now, as we progress through the season and I have more and more plants that are coming up and growing, you're going to be able to see a big difference.